There's a silent storm that brews inside certain minds. It doesn't roar, doesn't flash for attention. It hums beneath the surface like an invisible current, steady and unresolved. These are the minds that see behind smiles, that hear the emptiness between words, that feel emotions others don't even recognize within themselves. They carry this quiet ache wherever they go, not because something is wrong with them, but because they notice what others overlook. It's not that they want to suffer. It's that they can't unsee the fractures others are content to ignore. Picture this: you're sitting among friends, or perhaps family. The atmosphere is light, filled with trivial updates and shallow jokes that bounce around the room like air bubbles. Everyone plays their part, says what's expected, responds with ease. But then you speak about something real, something thoughtful, something you've been carrying, and the atmosphere shifts. No one replies. Eyes glance away. Someone laughs nervously and changes the subject. The warmth disappears, and you're left wondering why truth has the power to change a room so instantly. It's not because you were rude. It's not because you said something wrong. It's because you disturbed the illusion. Because depth, to those who live on the surface, feels like confrontation. They don't know what to do with your honesty, so they back away, they fidget. They call you intense, dramatic, difficult, but you're not any of those things. You're awake. And in a world of sleepwalkers, wakefulness is unsettling. Carl Jung knew this feeling. He saw how those who reflect deeply are often pushed to the outskirts, not because they lack value, but because they threaten the structure of comfort most people build their lives around. It's easier to mock sincerity than to confront your own numbness. It's more comfortable to ridicule someone else's insight than to examine your own patterns. And so, over and over again, the ones who feel deeply are treated as if their clarity is a flaw. But it's not a flaw, it's a mirror. And most people can't stand to see themselves without makeup. They prefer the filtered version of reality, the polished narrative, the safe illusions that keep them moving through life without too many questions. You, however, ask those questions, not to rebel, not to cause trouble, but because your soul can't rest until it understands, until it sees what's beneath the surface, until it hears what wasn't said, until it feels what's been buried. From the very beginning, you were probably different. As a child, you didn't accept "because I said so" as an answer. You wondered why the rules were the way they were, why adults contradicted themselves, why feelings were hidden and truths avoided. You noticed what others dismissed. You cried over things others called trivial. You laughed at thoughts no one else understood. And instead of being celebrated for your insight, you were often corrected, silenced, told to fit in. Why can't you just be normal? That question echoes through the life of a deep thinker. It starts young, but it never really goes away. It follows you through school, where memorizing facts is rewarded over asking questions. It follows you into relationships, where lightheartedness is preferred over vulnerability. It follows you into work, where conformity ensures safety and questioning threatens the system. You learn quickly that if you want to belong, you have to shrink. So you practice dimming your light, you rehearse silence, you teach yourself how to wear the mask even if it suffocates you. But inside, the questions keep growing. You think in layers. While others are laughing at a joke, you're analyzing what it reveals about human nature. While others are bragging about success, you're wondering what their souls sacrificed to achieve it. While others chase happiness, you search for meaning. It's not that you don't enjoy joy or laughter or celebration. It's that you crave what's real. You ache for truth, not because it's glamorous, but because it's the only thing that feels solid in a world built on performance. And so, over time, your inner world becomes your sanctuary, You build it carefully with books and art and solitude and thought. You create a space where you don't have to pretend, where the noise of the world doesn't drown out your intuition. But that sanctuary often becomes a prison, not because you're trapped inside it, but because so few people are willing to meet you there. Carl Jung warned of this loneliness. He said that the deeper you go into your own psyche, the more disconnected you may feel from those who haven't made that journey. It's not superiority, it's separation. Not because you wanted to be apart, but because you followed a path others refused to walk. They stayed in the sun. You ventured into the shadow. And once you've seen what the shadow holds, your own pain, your own contradictions, your own desires, you can't unsee it in others. You notice the smile that doesn't reach the eyes, the laugh that's too loud, the words that dance around the truth. You see the masks, the defense mechanisms, the silent suffering people carry like ghosts on their backs. You want to help, you want to speak, but you've learned what happens when you do. They say you're negative. They say you're overthinking. They accuse you of making things complicated, but you're not complicating anything. You're just refusing to simplify what's complex. You're not over-analyzing, you're perceiving layers they haven't dared to consider. So you retreat. Not because you want to be alone, but because solitude is easier than misunderstanding, because being by yourself is less painful than being surrounded by people who don't see you. You learn how to exist in silence, how to find beauty in it, how to use it as a mirror instead of a cage. Still, the ache remains, the longing to be understood, the hope that somewhere out there, someone is thinking these same thoughts, asking these same questions, feeling these same waves crash through their spirit. And sometimes you meet them. In rare electric moments, your eyes meet someone else's and you know instantly they understand. They've walked this path. They've burned in this fire. They know the weight, the cost, the gift, because it is a gift. A painful one, yes, a heavy one, but a gift nonetheless. To see what others don't, to feel what others can't, to hold space for grief, for truth, for beauty that has no language, to witness the world not through filters but through a soul that refuses to be numb. That is not a curse. That is your calling. And yet that calling will often go unnoticed, because this world doesn't reward quiet clarity. It rewards noise, it worships speed, profit, performance. It prefers the illusion of strength over the vulnerability of honesty. And so you'll be overlooked, passed by, misunderstood. But not by everyone, because there are those hidden in plain sight who crave exactly what you offer. They're tired too, tired of small talk, tired of pretending, tired of running from themselves. They're waiting for someone to speak what they've been afraid to say. And when they hear your words, they'll feel less alone. Not because you fixed them, not because you saved them, but because you reminded them they're not broken. You reminded them they're not crazy for seeing what they see, for feeling what they feel, for carrying this invisible weight with grace, even when the world calls it weakness. Jung believed that only through individuation, that journey of becoming fully, unapologetically yourself, can the soul find peace. And that path is anything but easy. It requires silence. It requires courage. It requires a willingness to let go of belonging in order to find wholeness. Most people never take that path. They stay close to the script. They keep performing. They fear what they might find in the stillness. But you have already begun by asking the hard questions, by refusing the easy answers, by choosing to feel, even when it hurts. And that choice changes everything. Not just for you, but for the world. Because every time someone like you refuses to lie, refuses to numb, refuses to pretend, it creates space for someone else to do the same. It opens a door. It starts a fire. It calls others home. So don't silence yourself just to make others comfortable. Don't shrink so others can feel tall. Don't dilute your truth to be more palatable. The world doesn't need more conformity. It needs your depth, your honesty, your unwavering clarity. Even if it costs you comfort, even if it costs you connection, even if it costs you everything you once thought you needed. Because the moment you stop betraying yourself is the moment you start becoming who you were always meant to be. There comes a point in a deep thinker's life when the world begins to feel foreign. Not because anything around them has changed, but because they have. What once seemed normal now feels artificial. Conversations that used to fill the air with ease begin to sound hollow. People still smile, still talk, still perform their lives like they're on a stage, but you can sense the emptiness behind their words. And it hurts. Not in a dramatic way, but like a quiet erosion, a soft ache in the background of everything. You look around and wonder why everyone seems so comfortable pretending, why they don't question the narratives they've inherited, the expectations they obey, the pain they suppress, and sometimes you envy them. Their ease, their lightness, their ability to laugh without needing meaning behind every joke. But that envy never lasts, because you know what they've traded for comfort. You know the price of denial, and you're not willing to pay it. Carl Jung called this mass-mindedness, a state where people adopt beliefs, values, and habits not because they truly resonate, but because they're socially approved. They don't investigate the truth for themselves. They absorb it from the culture around them, and in doing so, they lose touch with who they really are. From the moment we're born, we're handed a script. We're taught what to believe, what to chase, what to fear, what to avoid. We're told how to behave, how to dress, how to succeed, but very few are taught how to feel. Fewer are taught how to think for themselves, and almost no one is taught how to be still. Deep thinkers are the exception, not because they're better, but because they can't help but question the script. They can't blindly repeat what they've been told. When something doesn't make sense, they can't let it go. When something feels wrong, they carry it until they understand why. That's why traditional systems often suffocate them. School is rarely designed for minds that wonder and explore. It rewards memorization, not introspection. Compliance, not originality. You're praised for giving the right answer, even if it means betraying your curiosity. And when you challenge that system, you're not seen as insightful. You're seen as a disruption. You sit in a classroom, your mind drifting not out of laziness, but because your imagination refuses to be caged. You're asked to recite facts, but you want to know why those facts matter. You're given assignments, but you want to understand the meaning behind them. And every time you deviate, you're reminded, stay in line. So you learn to suppress your questions. You learn that being quiet keeps the peace, that blending in keeps you safe. But inside, a storm continues to brew. As you grow older, you take that storm with you into adulthood, into jobs where creativity is stifled by routine, into friendships where truth is unwelcome, into relationships where vulnerability is mistaken for weakness. And all the while you wonder, is it me? Am I too intense, too complicated, too sensitive? But you're not too anything. You're just unwilling to abandon your soul. In a world that rewards performance, being genuine is a quiet form of rebellion. You don't chase titles, you chase truth. You don't seek popularity, you seek meaning. And because of that, people don't always know what to do with you. You ask the questions that others avoid. You see through facades. You name the things that have no name. And that makes people nervous. It's not that they hate you, it's that you remind them of the parts of themselves they've buried. You bring light to the wounds they've ignored. You hold up a mirror they're not ready to face. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow, the meeting between a person and the parts of themselves they've exiled. And for many, that encounter is terrifying. So they reject the one who reflects it. That person is often you. You may have tried many times to warn someone you loved, to help them see the self-destruction they were caught in, to gently bring light to a pattern that was breaking them. But instead of appreciation, you received distance, anger, silence. You weren't attacking them. You were offering insight. But insight, when it arrives too early, feels like invasion. They said you were being negative, that you should stop analyzing everything, that you're always making things so serious. But you weren't being serious. You were being sincere. And in a culture built on masks, sincerity feels like exposure. Still, you try to connect. You try to soften your truth, to round off your edges, to filter your thoughts into something more digestible, but it never quite works. Because your mind doesn't know how to stay shallow. It dives, it explores, it reaches. And that reaching costs you. It costs you comfort, it costs you inclusion. Sometimes it even costs you love. Because not everyone wants to be known deeply. Not everyone is ready for the level of seeing you bring into the room. And so, the loneliness grows, not from being alone, but from being unseen. Jung once said that loneliness doesn't come from solitude. It comes from the inability to share what matters most. How often have you wanted to talk about grief, death, purpose, dreams, pain, love, the real kind, the messy kind, only to be met with blank stares or surface replies? How many times have you swallowed your truth because you sensed the person across from you wasn't ready to hear it? That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And it comes at a cost. You begin to doubt your own depth. You start thinking, maybe it is too much. Maybe I should tone it down. Maybe I should stop caring so much. But you can't. Not because you're stubborn, because it's who you are. And pretending to be anything else would destroy you faster than solitude ever could. You're not here to fit in, you're here to awaken. And that awakening begins when you stop apologizing for your depth. When you stop waiting for others to catch up. When you stop bargaining with your authenticity in exchange for temporary acceptance. You're not meant for everyone. That's not arrogance. That's reality. You're meant for the ones who can meet you in the fire, who can hold space for contradictions, who don't flinch when you speak the truth, who don't back away from complexity. And those people exist, but they won't find you if you keep hiding. They won't recognize you if you keep pretending. The very things you were told to suppress, your intensity, your questions, your emotional depth, are the things that will call your people to you. But you have to be willing to be misunderstood in the meantime. You have to be okay with silence, with distance, with walking alone for a while. Because the path of authenticity is not crowded, and yet it's the only path that leads home. Jung believed that the journey inward, the path toward individuation, is the most important work a human being can do. Not just for themselves, but for the world. Because only when we face ourselves can we stop projecting our wounds onto others. Only when we heal can we stop passing our pain forward. But healing isn't glamorous. It's not always beautiful. It often looks like crying alone, like walking away from what once felt safe, like feeling everything you've been taught to avoid, like losing friends, lovers, jobs, identities that no longer fit. But in that loss, something new begins. A quieter, deeper version of yourself emerges. One that doesn't need to perform, one that doesn't chase validation, one that doesn't abandon themselves for love. That version of you is not a product of achievement. It's the result of unlearning, of peeling away the layers of who you were taught to be, of returning to the raw, untamed, radiant truth of who you actually are. And that self, the true self, is what the world so desperately needs. Not more influencers, not more noise, not more polished images, but real people, whole people, people who have dared to know themselves. That's you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're willing. Willing to feel, to think, to break, to rebuild. Willing to be real when the world begs for illusion. Willing to stand alone if that's what truth demands. And make no mistake, it often will. But in that solitude, in that raw space between belonging and becoming, you will find the thing that most people spend their lives searching for: peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of alignment. Not comfort, but meaning. And meaning, true meaning, is what makes the struggle worth it. ChatGPT said, "There's a kind of exhaustion that words rarely capture. Not the kind that comes from lack of sleep or physical labor, but the kind that settles deep in your bones after years of trying to carry what others can't even name." If you're a deep thinker, you've probably felt it. The heaviness of seeing too much, of understanding things before others even notice there's something wrong. The mental fatigue of listening not just to what's said, but to what's withheld. The emotional labor of offering clarity to people who fear their own reflection. It's not that you want to be strong for everyone. It's that you've been forced to. People gravitate to you when they're lost. They come to you for insight, for comfort, for calm. And because you care deeply, sometimes too deeply, you give it again and again. You hold their pain. You decipher their chaos. You translate emotions they haven't even admitted to themselves. And they leave feeling lighter. But you're left with the weight. Their weight, layered on top of your own. Carl Jung understood this imbalance. He spoke of how individuals unconsciously project their wounds onto those who are more self-aware. Not out of malice, but out of need. They see your clarity and mistake it for endless capacity. They sense your peace and assume you're unshakable. So they unload, and you absorb. Until one day you realize you're disappearing. Your voice becomes quiet in your own life. Your needs blur into the background. Your boundaries erode because you've spent so long attending to others. And when you finally say, "I need space," it's not met with gratitude. It's met with confusion, accusations. You've changed. You're distant. You're selfish. But you're not selfish. You're drained. This is the invisible burnout of deep thinkers, not from doing too much, but from feeling too much, from being everything to everyone without asking for anything in return. Because somewhere along the way, you were taught that your role was to understand, not to be understood, to support, not to be supported, to listen, not to speak, and that needs to change. Your insight is a gift, yes, but it's not infinite. Your empathy is powerful, but it's not a bottomless well. You are not a machine. You are not a vessel for other people's healing while your own heart goes unattended. You deserve space, silence, replenishment, and above all, you deserve to be seen in your fullness, not just as a source of wisdom or support, but as a whole, complex, evolving human being. The systems we live in don't always allow for that. Media, education, relationships, they're built around distraction, speed, consumption, rarely around depth, rarely around truth. That's why so much of what deep thinkers experience feels isolating. You walk through the world tuned to a different frequency, You see the undercurrents, the patterns, the subtext. You notice the manipulation in advertisements, the emptiness behind viral trends, the way society masks emptiness with noise. Even scrolling through your phone becomes an emotional labor. Every post, every headline, every filtered image, it's data. And you're not just consuming it, you're deconstructing it, analyzing the intention behind it, feeling the emotions it stirs. While others scroll and forget, you scroll and reflect. You scroll and carry. And that takes energy. A kind of energy the world doesn't acknowledge, much less repay. This is why boundaries are essential, not as a rejection of others, but as a return to yourself. You can't pour endlessly. You can't be everyone's sanctuary while ignoring your own need for shelter. At some point, you have to reclaim your energy, not just for rest, but for alignment, for presence, for clarity. Jung believed that healing doesn't come from fixing others. It comes from integrating yourself, from bringing the unconscious into the light, from tending to your own inner life as carefully as you've tended to everyone else's. Because the real revolution isn't changing the world, it's refusing to let the world change you into something you're not. And who you are at your core is not too much, not too serious, not too intense. You are a depth that cannot be simplified, a truth that refuses to be silenced, a soul that resists the shallow performance of modern life. And yet, you may often feel misunderstood, even resented, because depth challenges people. It exposes what's been buried. It interrupts comfort. It holds up a mirror and says, "Look," not out of cruelty, but out of love. But most people don't recognize that kind of love. They confuse it with confrontation. They call it judgment. They label it coldness. But it's not cold. It's clarity. And clarity, for those hiding in fog, feels like fire. That's why you must be careful with your presence. Not everyone deserves access to it. Not everyone is ready for it. Some will consume your energy without honoring its cost. Some will take your words and twist them. Some will ask for your light while mocking your shadows, but some won't. Some will stay. Some will meet you where you are. They'll speak the unspoken. They'll feel the weight and not run. They'll hold your truth without flinching. And in their presence, you'll remember what it feels like to rest, to be mirrored, to be home. These are your people, rare, scattered, but real. And when you find them, everything shifts, because the loneliness you've carried wasn't just about isolation. It was about disconnection from others, yes, but also from the truth that you're not alone in your complexity, that others see it too, that others are building inner worlds just as vast, just as intricate. The world may not celebrate this kind of connection. It doesn't go viral, it doesn't sell, but it nourishes in a way nothing else does. It softens the ache, it restores what performance culture erodes. So don't hide your mind, don't silence your questions, don't dim your voice to make others comfortable. Your depth is not a liability, it's a lifeline, for you, for others, for the world. Jung once said that when we deny our inner truth to please the collective, we betray the soul, and that betrayal is the root of most suffering, not just individual, but collective. Because the more we perform, the more we conform, the more disconnected we become from what actually heals us. Meaning, stillness, connection, courage. You are not here to perform. You are not here to meet expectations. You are here to awaken. First yourself, then others. Not by force, but by embodiment. Not by preaching, but by being. Being honest, being present. Being rooted in something deeper than applause, because applause fades, but alignment stays. There may be times you question the value of this path. You may wonder, what's the point of seeing so much if I'm always alone in it? That question is valid. It's human. But the answer isn't in abandoning your depth. It's in honoring it more fully. Because you weren't made to reach everyone. You were made to reach the ones who resonate, the ones who need your voice, not because it entertains, but because it liberates, the ones who don't flinch when you speak truth, the ones who feel relief, not resistance, in your presence. And those people, once found, change everything. So trust the ache, trust the pull, trust the intuition that tells you there's more than this. Even when others don't see it, even when the world tells you to tone it down, even when the silence stretches longer than you thought you could bear. Because what you're doing, this work of thinking, feeling, questioning, transforming, is not small, it's sacred. And it matters more than you know. You don't need to be louder. You need to be clearer. You don't need to reach more people. You need to reach the right ones. You don't need to change who you are. You need to become more of who you've always been, beneath the conditioning. That's the task of the deep thinker. Not to fix the world, but to refuse to abandon yourself in a world that begs you to. And when you do that, when you stay true to what you feel, what you know, what you are, you become something rare. You become a signal, a lighthouse in a storm, a place where truth can breathe. That's your gift, not to be understood by the masses, but to be remembered by the few who finally feel seen. And when you live from that place, when you stop trying to be what you're not, you'll realize you were never too much. You were just exactly enough for those who matter. They've been looking for someone like you, someone who thinks in echoes and metaphors, someone who speaks like silence and listens like thunder, someone who doesn't flinch at shadow or light, someone who doesn't trade their soul for validation. So let them find you, not the version of you that performs, the real one, the wild one, the whole one. And if they don't, if the world never fully sees you, you'll still be free. Because in a world addicted to surface, depth is its own salvation. And you, by simply existing as you are, have already begun to change it. Quietly, relentlessly, completely, even if no one notices until it's too late.